Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Bacon. Welcome to the show, y'all. I used to think the ugliest thing a man could carry was a weapon he wasn't ready to use. That changed the day Malik Johnson came to my doorway and sat down without asking, like a storm that finally chose a roof and dared it to hold. He looked like a man who'd been emptied and then told to keep pouring. No swagger left, no story about who disrespected who. Just a pair of hands that couldn't get still and a whisper that kept missing words like the air wouldn't lend them out. "They got my boy," he said, and the dome got quieter in my head than it was in the room. There's a special hush that drops when a father says those four words. It ain't fear, it ain't rage, it's an elevator falling, stomach first, truth chasing it down the shaft. Malik never dealt in little feelings. Out there, he ran crews the way generals grade maps, eyebrows low, voice ironed flat, orders spoken like they were debts being collected. People say the block writes a man's biography before he's old enough to vote in his own life. Malik's first chapters were steady money and careful violence. Last chapters were sealed with evidence bag tape, but even sealed stories leak. And that afternoon, the leak was his son's name, Darius, and he didn't start with the call. He started with the morning before it. Said he woke up in his bunk and the ceiling felt too close, like the prison had lowered itself an inch overnight just to hear him breathe. Breakfast was soft and wet and pointless. On the yard, he walked his usual 8 laps, counting cracks in the concrete like bad habits. Then the porter passed a note, one of those folded triangles boys make in 8th grade when they want to tell a secret that don't deserve postage. It was a number, just 10 digits, and the word call. We ain't supposed to have phones. We do. The gospel of survival is written in exceptions. He used one that afternoon in a shower stall with steam thick like gossip. The voice on the other end was calm like a funeral home brochure. "We got your son," it said, and "we want your stash, your cash, your safe addresses, everything you call the future. You got 6 hours." Malik told me he laughed. Not because it was funny, because disbelief always borrows courage as clothes when it's broke. "Try me," he said into the steam. "Touch a hair on his head and your uncle's gonna bury son." The voice didn't argue. It hung up like it had already been right. He paced a tear after that like he could outrun the idea. You don't realize how loud a corridor is until your heart starts keeping a different rhythm. He told himself what old heads tell themselves: it's a bluff. They don't really want the war that come with hurting a child. He said it out loud 3 times to make it true. Truth did not volunteer. 2 hours later, a second triangle note slid under his door. Porch was all it said. His stomach went cold. He called Layla, Darius's mother, and told her don't open the door. She didn't listen. Mothers don't listen to orders delivered in panic. They obey a law older than threats. They dumped him on the steps. Not dead, breathing like a secret that didn't want the responsibility of being true. Shot at the temple, blood bright on the doormat like a warning sign. Neighbors screaming, a dog losing his mind, somebody yelling, "Call somebody," and the boy's eyes open but not here. Malik's voice broke, telling me. He said he could hear Layla scream over the phone, and then the sound the phone itself makes when grief decides it wants the line to itself. "They said he might live," he said, and then he looked past me like he was checking whether God was in the window. But when I saw that blood, Joe, I learned I already failed the test. I ain't a priest, but I know confession when it walks in without knocking. The test wasn't whether he could protect his boy. It was whether he could value him correctly in a world that misprices everything. For 3 days, he was quiet. That's a long time in here. Time grows teeth when you stop feeding it conversation. The 4th day, he sat up and started writing. Not letters to Darius. He said the boy didn't owe him the labor of reading. He wrote to himself like he was both doctor and patient, prescribing lines that stung on entry and burned on exit. On the first page, he wrote in big, ugly block letters, "The price of not believing." He filled a line every morning. "Fear dresses like pride when you iron it too long. Money is a mouth that don't say thank you. If the devil calls, don't negotiate, hang up and run to your child." He put the pencil down and breathed like he'd been sprinting. When they finally let him call the hospital, the nurse said Darius was a miracle with a limp. Memory spotty, headaches like thunder, smile still there, just quieter. Later, Layla sent a picture. The boy on the couch with a bandage peeking under his hairline, jaw set like he was trying to keep the rest of his face from falling apart. Malik held the picture the way people hold newborns in church, careful, confused, trying not to make a promise they can't keep. He'd take it out at night and stare. Then he started sketching, not the whole face, just eyes. He could not make them look young enough to forgive him. He'd tear the page in strips and flush it like evidence. "Memory lie," he muttered once, "but paper don't." The yard kept moving around us like it always does, dominoes cracking, politics flaring, deals pretending to be friendships. But Malik stepped out of that traffic. He quit hustling peanuts and favors, stopped being the second voice in any conversation. When men tried to pull him back into the orbit of the old code, meetings about posture, rules about retaliation, he shook his head. "Strong ain't noise," he said once. "Strong is learning how not to repeat yourself." The first visit with Darius came 3 weeks later. Malik walked into the hospital room like a man entering a courtroom where the judge is his child. The boy sat propped up with pillows like he was being displayed, not healed. They looked at each other long enough for the clock to get offended. Then Malik said, "I'm sorry." He wanted to say it like a building coming down. He said it like dust. Darius didn't respond. He stared at the window where the city kept being the city. Finally, he said, "You chose the stash." Not loud, not accusing, just the way you say weather. A fact nobody asked your permission to announce. That sentence broke Malik more cleanly than the cuffs ever did. There's a break you can set with a cast and a prayer. Then there's a break that turns a man into a museum of his own ruins. Back in the unit, he stopped sleeping. On the third night, he shook me awake and whispered. He said, "I chose the stash." I said, "You heard him." He nodded like a man agreeing with the ocean. "I did," he said. "I just ain't know I was choosing it while I was choosing it." That's how sin works when you dress it in strategy. You call it calculation. You call it discipline. And then it presents the receipt with your last name printed in your child's handwriting. He tried prayer after that, his version. Not the kneel and speak kind, the scrub the table until the surface shines kind. He joined the cleaning crew and wiped every edge of the day room like he was erasing evidence God already filed. The COs teased him, "Johnson, you marrying that table?" And he just kept moving. Every stroke was penance pretending to be hygiene. He also started showing up to the GED table, not as a student, not as a boss, just as a witness. The young ones talked about fractions like the world would end if numerators and denominators refused to date. Malik would listen, silent, then say something that read like math, but sounded like a father. "Top number is your reasons," he told them once. "Bottom number is your weight. Make sure the bottom don't swallow the top." The room went quiet, the way a cheap radio goes quiet when a storm passes through it. He didn't get saintly, don't twist it. He still had heat in him, still had the old hair trigger for disrespect. One baby thug made a crack about getting shot into thoughts, and Malik rose like a tide, eyes bright, jaw clenched. I put a hand on his shoulder and felt the electricity underneath, the kind you use to light a city or burn it down. He breathed, sat back down. Later he told me, "I ain't unlearned nothing. I just ain't aiming at the wrong target tonight." The letters from Layla came like weather reports. Some days clear, most days scattered storms. Darius stopped therapy twice, went back once, then quit for good. He wore hoodies in July and slept in shoes. Started walking with that little hitch survivors sometimes get, like the ground owes them an explanation and won't give it. One line stripped Malik down to wire. He keeps asking if you meant it. Meant what? The refusal, the life, the fatherhood. The question had more teeth than a complaint. A month later, Darius wrote himself, short and crooked like he didn't trust the pen yet. Pop, I still love you. I ain't the same. My head rang all day like a fire alarm that forgot why it's loud. I forgive you. Malik read that line 3 times in the middle of the tear, and then folded the paper into something that looked like a shield. Forgiveness hit harder than a blade, he said, voice thin. You can push back on hate. Forgiveness just hands you a mirror. He started keeping his notebook under the mattress. Each morning, one line. Pride is a locksmith that steals his own key. Money buys silence and sells noise. If I ever get free, I'll put my ear to my son's breath and listen for what I owe him. I told him the last one was heavy. He said weight was the only meter he trusted anymore. He also told me about the dream. Every night the phone rings. Same calm voice, same demand. But the third night, the voice says, we already collected. You just ain't paid yet. He wakes up soaked, like he swam through regret and found no shore. One evening he asked me, you think God forgives a man who won't forgive himself? I said, I think God speaks a language we keep interrupting. He nodded, didn't agree, didn't disagree, just filed it under maybe. The unit got a new CO around that time, young, too neat, eager to practice cruelty like it was a trade skill. He made sport a mail call, holding letters just out of reach like treats for trained dogs. Malik never rose to the bait. He stood with hands folded and eyes down, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with fists. Men confuse quiet with surrender, he whispered once. But quiet is how you learn the names of your ghosts. Another visit with Darius, this time through the glass because the universe likes to stage irony. The boy looked older by injuries you couldn't photograph. He picked up the phone and said, I ain't mad. Malik broke in a way you could hear, that inhale people make when they want to stop time from continuing with this particular scene. Don't forgive me because I'm your father, he said. Forgive me if it makes you lighter. Darius nodded, eyes unfixed, and asked, you ever gonna come home? I don't know what home mean anymore, Malik answered, and the line buzzed like it understood. Back on the yard, he started walking laps with the new kids. Not the loud ones, the ones who blinked too much when the gate clanged. He'd say small things that landed heavy. Don't let a gang give you a last name. If the code asks you to bury your mother's voice, that ain't a code. That's a collar. Don't carry a gun if you're scared of questions. Some wrote those down like scripture. Others rolled their eyes like the sermon was off key. Time will grade their notes. He told me a story from when Darius was 7. Kid loved bikes like prayer, rode them hard and reckless, elbows flared, knees out, grin cut wide across summer. One day Malik raced him down Morton Street with one hand on the handlebar and one hand ready to catch a fall the boy hadn't earned yet. That's what fatherhood was supposed to be, he said, tears finally threatening peril. A hand near the fall, not a bullet near the head. I didn't give advice. Advice is cheap. Presence is the only currency that holds value in a room full of men who have already spent too much of themselves. The rumor mill did what rumor mills do, ground everything into a fine, addictive powder. People said the opposition bragged about shooting a king without killing him. They said it was worse to let a man live with his failure than to bury him with his legend. They said a lot of things because saying things is easier than visiting a boy with a scar who smiles like he doesn't want to scare you. One afternoon, the chapel worker handed out slips for a grief group. Not my lane, Malik muttered. You grieving? I said. Nah, he said. I'm paying. He didn't go. Instead, he sat on the bottom step of the tier and watched dust float in a sunbeam like tiny witnesses. Later, he told me, talk don't fix receipts. He burned the sketches the night after that. Every eye, every almost face fed to a little flame in a noodle bowl, smoke slipping toward the vent like it had a visit to make. The fire alarm chirped once and quit, like even it respected the ritual. Why? I asked. I keep drawing him like a memory, he said. He alive. He ain't a memory. If I keep freezing him, I'll forget the part that moves. For a while there was calm, the kind of calm that makes you suspicious because you know life hates a flat line. Then came the letter that said Darius got picked up on a possession charge with a gun he didn't own and a future he didn't recognize. Malik read it once and didn't read it again. He just set it down and stared at the place on the table where the letter used to be. He followed my shadow, he said, voice unthreaded. Not my footsteps. Shadows ain't directions. They just proof you blocked the light, he tried to call. The call didn't go through. He tried to pray. The prayer didn't go through either. Or if it did, it came back stamped, returned to sender by a conscience doing its job. That night he handed me a folded note and said, if I never say this right to his face, you hold it anyway. I waited until he slept to read it. Son, if love was a safe, I kept the combination to myself and left you standing outside. I was God in emptiness. I'm sorry. The next morning, he swept the day room slow as scripture. When he finished, he stared at the broom like he was measuring whether it could hold another confession. You think I can build anything from here? He asked. Yeah, I said, a witness. He gave me a look that said he wanted lumber, not testimony. We took laps at dusk. The yard lights clicked on one by one like cheap stars. He said, if I could take that call again, I'd scream yes so loud they would have dropped the gun. You don't know that, I said, because honesty is a splint. I don't care, he answered. I want to believe I still had a spine that could bend the right direction. After count, he sat on his bunk and wrote his daily line. He let me read it after a long pause. A father is a door. The house learns who gets in by who he lets pass. He capped the pen and slid the notebook back under the mattress like a man hiding food from his past self. I wish I could tell you that the story lifted then. I wish I could say the visit's warm, the boy chose school, the father found a church that could hold a sin that size, but wishes are just fantasies with better PR. What happened is smaller and heavier. Malik learned how to say his son's name without swallowing it. He learned to sit in a room without pretending the room owed him air. He learned to spot pride when it walked in wearing his jacket. Days turned the color of routine. He taught a few boys how to read the paper without reading the ads pretending to be news. He traded his commissary honey bun for a pencil that wasn't chewed to grief. He stopped telling stories about the old days the way veterans tell bad jokes. When the TV screamed about a shooting 3 counties away, he turned it off like he was closing a door on a house that had already burned down. One late night, he sat up and said, you ever hear a sound that ain't there and know you deserve it anyway? I said, every time a gate slams in my head. For me, it's the ring, he whispered. I live inside that ring. The dorm hummed, men snored. Somewhere a CO laughed at something cruel. Malik stared into the dark like it contained subtitles for the life he missed. And that's where I'll leave this half. With a man who finally knows the shape of his debt, paying it in the only currency still available, quiet witness, careful steps that don't trample what's left. He cannot unring the phone. He cannot rewind the porch. The blood washed off the concrete, but not out of the calendar. He keeps writing one line a day under the price of not believing. He keeps sweeping the same floor like repetition could become redemption if you do it gently enough. He keeps his voice low because loud has already cost him everything that matters. And sometimes when the lights go out and the tear goes still, I hear him humming that little tune from Morton Street, the one Darius sang when summer was new and gravity felt negotiable. It sounds like memory trying to grow new legs. It sounds like a father who will spend the rest of his days walking a circle around a single question. If the devil calls again, do you answer with money or your whole heart? He knows the answer now. The trouble with knowing is you still got to live with the chapter that came before. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.